Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, in this go-go world that we're living in, where we're all running non-stop, it's nice to get an opportunity and slow down a little bit and really dive into something. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm assuming you do because you're listening right now, you can subscribe to the podcast. You can find us over at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel, so if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd really appreciate it. Also, you can find us on the social media, as the kids are calling it. You can find us on Facebook, or the Meta now, whatever it's called, on Twitter and on Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and most importantly, because it's where it all began, it is the genesis of this little thing we call In the Seats. It's In the Seats, intheseats.ca. Please come by and pay us a visit, because that's where we love writing about and talking about basically the moving image at large. Film, television, it doesn't matter. So come by and read about it, because that we love it when you do. Because we all have the same affliction. We all love this business of show and storytelling and the whole 9 yards. But that's a nice dovetail into this episode, because we're doing something a little different. All this week, we're looking, there will be several episodes looking at one movie in particular. It's a movie called Hell Hath No Fury, and it is hitting theaters this coming Friday, November 5th, from our friends at Will Go USA Entertainment, and it's a really fantastic war film. It's the story of French national Marie DuJardin, who's played by the excellent Nina Bergman, and she's branded a traitor, and she's in prison. But she's rescued by American soldiers on one condition. In order to survive, she has to lead them to a cache of gold that's not only the Americans are looking for, but the French resistance is looking for, and the Nazis are even looking for at the end of the war. It's such a compelling story, especially during those final days of World War II, where people did what they had to do. That was just life, and it's brutal, but it's a really compelling set piece, and it's really excellently done. And we had the unique pleasure on this episode of talking with director Jesse V. Johnson about sort of the origins of the film, casting it, getting it all together, shooting during COVID, making this kind of really intense character piece, and so on and so forth. We had a fantastic talk, and it's the first of many talks we're going to be having on this film, because every day this week we will be talking not only with Jesse, well, Jesse's today, but we have all members of the cast as well coming up in different episodes coming down the week. So if you like what you hear, please keep checking out those episodes, because we've got lots of fantastic conversations coming to you over the next few days. But first up, let's talk with Jesse, a real Hollywood veteran who again has made a fantastic film, and he was a fantastic guy to talk to. I hope you enjoy it. All right, well, Jesse, obviously, first off, thank you so much for the time today, and congratulations on the film, man. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Now, I guess my first question is, walk me through sort of the story of this coming across your desk. I'm always fascinated how sort of scripts find their way out of the never-ending pile that I'm sure, directors and filmmakers get on a day-to-day basis.
It's an interesting one, this one. I'm always looking. I'm always hungry. Always reading old books, old scripts, anything that people have that's sort of available. And every sort of 6 months, 7 months, I'll put a sort of a blast out, and it goes through Facebook and LinkedIn and Inktip and all of the various different sort of and even friends. I have assistants and people at USC, and I'll say I'm looking for something. And on this particular occasion, it was just prior to COVID, and I said I wanted something that could be shot at minimal locations with minimal cast, that had a certain amount of action to it, and sort of put down fairly heavy specifics. and sent this out. I probably got about 55 scripts submitted. This one came through LinkedIn, if I remember correctly, and it was coming from a French writer whose English was not that great in the query letter, and the script itself had been translated with one of those Google Translate programs, so it was fairly funky. But there was it came with 4 or 5 comic book illustrations that really, really got my interest. And it's the one thing all of those sort of script books says: never send illustrations, never send comic books, just send the script on its own. And it was absolutely the comic book illustrations that got me on this one. And I've translated it properly. I read it, and there was just something about it, something that was irreverent and different and interesting enough that it caught my interest. I hadn't, without giving spoilers away, I'm not sure when you're planning on releasing this, but I hadn't read anything that painted the US in anything but the most glowing of terms. Now,
right.
I spent a lot of time with soldiers. I was a kid. I that was my life for the first few years of my adult life. And soldiers aren't all wonderful people. They're not nice people. You're a bunch of guys all together. It's rarer to find anyone amongst them who is truly a good person and will go again. For the most part, they're very base. And I felt that every World War II film I'd seen that depicted the American army made them out to be some kind of a almost biblical second coming sort of. And as much as there is a truth to that as well, with what they're doing and the wonderful cause that they were fighting for and volunteering for. There's also another side to the story, and I wanted to sort of explore that and see a little bit of that. And that got me very, very interested. The fact that there were no white hats or black hats in this. Everyone had an element of good in them. Everyone had an element of greed, and the two sort of, the id and the ego and the superego on each shoulder, the good and the bad, were fighting with each other. And I found that really, really compelling and interesting. And I think perhaps it was because it was written by someone who's French and who doesn't have a dog in the fight. Well, I guess they had the French resistance in the movie, but it felt like an incredibly clear point of view, a really, really compelling perspective on the story that's been told so many times before, and got me really interested.
No, it's a fascinating character study, and I mean, just to see all these people sort of dueling against each other in this limited location, and I mean, it really puts you on the edge of your seat. And I mean, I love the action in it as well, because it's not necessarily action that's about set pieces. It's action that kind of draws you in and is very violent. Was that something that sort of appealed to you on this one, rather than trying to sort of stage like maybe the set pieces of something like a Triple Threat versus this,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the way that the action was handled in this incredibly personal, close space with a lot of anger and a lot of vitriol behind it really appealed to me. I like all of that kind of stuff. I love martial arts. I love what martial arts movies have done for me. They've made my career. They've made me a nice place that I live in and put my kids through private school and college, and so I love martial arts. But the martial arts movies are for young people. They're for a young state of mind. They're fantasy, total fantasy, and and that's an important thing. Escapism. The action in this felt a lot more real. It gave me a chance to do things that I hadn't done before, and I like that. Cowardly people acting in a violent situation. No one's heroic in this. They'd all rather not fight. They'd all rather not risk their life. They would all rather not die. There's no false heroism, and that's what real life is for me. Martial arts movies are wonderful, but they're a form of fantasy. In China, they were a form of mini opera. Over here they were, they're equally a form of Saturday morning TV. It's fun stuff. It's amusing. It's escapism. It's athletic. It's dance. It's as realistic as a musical. Which doesn't lower its importance as a form of art or as a form of cinema. But it's you move on, and you have to test yourself as a filmmaker. I think you can't keep doing the same thing. For sure.
No, and I mean, obviously in a film like this, it's such a unique character study, and you've got to find actors who are sort of up to the task. And if you don't, the thing's going to fail. And I mean, I love Nina in this film, and I'd never really seen her in anything else before. Can you talk to me a little bit just about sort of finding her and why you thought she was right for this one?
So we had a fantastic actress who was in Russia at the time of casting, and we're, you know, obviously COVID had hit, which is why we went with this script. I managed to raise financing for it again, not with the script, but with the illustrations that Romain, the writer, had sent with the script. The money was Russia based, and so we had a Russian actress who won a lot of awards, who was absolutely wonderful, lined up to play this role, and we couldn't get her out of Russia. We got closer and closer and closer to the shoot date. We did a table reading, and I had to have someone do it. And Nina is one of my dearest friends. We did a Wonder Woman short together. We've been friends. We've had films in development. She's one of the most incredible actresses I know, most incredible human beings I know, most positive, hardworking. She came, and I said, I don't know how to do this, Nina. I need you to read the part at the table read. We have another actress coming in who's going to play it. You've read the script. You love it. Would you mind doing that? And to her credit, Nina, you know, who is a lovely human being, said, no, absolutely, Jesse, I'll do that for you. And she came. She did the reading with the rest of the cast. I shit you not, every single member of that cast came to me independently, took me to the side and said, you have to hire her. She is unbelievable. Daniel, who's a big guy, and he's kind of imposing. He's taller than me and bigger than me. Put his hand on my chest and gently pushed me against the wall and said, you're making a huge mistake if you do not hire Nina to play this part. I can't say it any more than that. And even Dominic, my friend, you know, who I've known, you know, he was best man at my wedding 25 years ago, whatever, ex-Foreign Legion, took me aside, you know, and in this sort of Charles Bronson way that he talks, he said, you should hire her. She's the best one you'll get. Don't be an idiot, and walked off, you know. So everyone said that. Now I eventually went to the backer and I said, look, you know, we're 3 days away from filming. We're not going to get her out of Russia. You know, it's closed up. We don't know how long this COVID thing's going to last. We should, you know, Nina is absolutely exceptional. We need to go with her. And he delayed for another day. I think it was 48 hours before we started principal photography, and they dropped the hammer, and bless her, she jumped into that and she gave it every ounce of her soul. Every fiber of her is in this movie. And, she was burned, she was bruised, she was scratched, she was knocked over by explosives, you know, bumped into the location we're filming at was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. It was very, very hot, very dusty, lots of everything there was poisonous. You know, it's you know, we had a bear visit at one point. It was, you know, no cell phone, no internet, because of the nature of the COVID crisis. We had crew and cast sleeping, bubbling at the location. I didn't want anyone to leave. It was a very quick shoot, but I didn't want anyone to leave. We don't know what this disease was, you know. Very early on. And that all helped make this incredible sort of intense artistic working, you know, because everyone lived in the 1940s, you know, everyone lived in character. There were no distractions, no kids, no family. I mean, people could use their internet in the evenings once they signed, you know, the house, we had a sort of sender there, but during, you know, there was no taking photos or Instagram or any of that crap on set. I hate with a vengeance. I like people to come into the same world. You know, I harken back. I would love to be making films like John Ford or Hawks or Raoul Walsh made, where you took the crew with tents and you went out for, you know, you drove to Agua Dulce, which at the time was a 2-day trip from Culver City, and you made your movie there, and you came back with your movie like a good game hunter from the old days. You know, you came back with this product which had been made in a furnace, you know, and I like that. And so we got to do it. We got to make a movie that way. It was brilliant, man. It was really good.
That's amazing. I mean, it's a style of filmmaking that tends to be forgotten, but I mean, so many good things came out of that system of just pack up your shit, go out into the middle of the desert and do it, you know?
Absolutely, you know, absolutely. And I think people forget what an artistic process it is to make a film. You can break it down to zeros and ones. You can have your book and your budget. You've got your, you know, and every, you know, 9 to 5 and all this kind of stuff, which is fine. And, you know, obviously it's safety, and, you know, then, you know, you have to keep your days. I work to 12.5-hour days, you know, 12 hours working, half an hour lunch. I don't go longer than that. I feel it's like borrowing from a Russian mob boss. You go any longer than that, you'll get tired. You know, they're not operating at their peak. And, you know, if you are, if you aren't bubbling, if you're making a regular style movie, people are driving home late at night. So I also avoid that. You know, you don't want to ever have any, you know, this should be a fun artistic process. It should never be anything that's life threatening. But boy, it was really good, this one. It was an incredible shoot where everyone it was a very small unit and a very small cast, and everyone chipped in, and it was all about sort of creating the best movie possible, which is something that you don't always get, you know. So it was a very, you know, the adversity sort of turned to our advantage artistically, you know.
Well, I mean, in watching it, it really felt that at least from my perspective, it felt like maybe Daniel was having the most fun, because I mean, he's obviously built such a career on being the heavy based on how high he could kick or anything like that, but he was playing a heavy with some layers here. Can you talk a little bit about just deciding on Daniel just to be that guy and really sort of be sort of this very sort of compelling but interesting, good but also bad guy at the same time?
It's awesome. Daniel is fantastic. He's an incredible human being. One of the most talented sort of physical movers that is in cinema at the moment. I have no doubt about that. He didn't get to do much of that in this. We were going somewhere else with. I was introduced to him briefly before COVID by a very, very good writer called James Coyne, whose recommendations I trust immensely. And I'd heard a lot about Daniel over the years and was familiar with his work. But when you meet him in person, and I'm not sure if you're going to do any press with him on this one, you'll see the guy is infectious. So, you know, he has a good spirit and a positivity and a sort of energy that's absolutely, you can't stop smiling when you're sort of listening with him collaborate. It makes it all sort of very, very good fun, which is brilliant, you know. So I had this incredible meeting that was about an hour and a half where we talked about all of this work and how he was, you know, getting back into the game, but didn't care if he stunt coordinated, choreographed, acted. There was no ego, and it was genuine. It wasn't sort of lip service, and that really appealed to me. He also speaks 4 languages, you know, or 3 languages, which sort of resonated in my cerebellum. And then this film sort of came together almost a month later. You know, COVID hit, and it's like, you know, I managed to raise the financing for this, and we have this character who speaks German, French, and English, and is very suave. I didn't want to hire anyone outside of my circle. I knew I was going to have a couple of characters in there that were not in my circle, but everyone else, if you're familiar with my work, and I don't know if you are, I would never presume that, are people that have worked with me, including the crew. They're people I was very familiar with, and they were people that I knew I could call in a crisis time and say, do you mind coming out and doing this? I'm going to take my very, very best precautions to keep you all safe from this awful sort of pandemic, but we all need to work, and there's a chance here to make some sort of money and make something worthwhile. And, you know, so Daniel hadn't really been in my circle before, but he felt like he fit it, because he does that to you when you meet him. And he really leapt at the chance to do something that wasn't based on being able to throw a kick or throw a punch. And I think he's phenomenal in the picture. It's a very morally questionable character. I personally think he's one of the only characters who has a moral compass. It may be a little bit distorted, but it is right. Some form of a compass. And he loved it. You know, the first sort of love scene, and we shot that scene, you know, up first with Nina, where he's in bed and is naked and it's kissing, and there's a certain amount of touching going on. And he looked at me between takes with a huge grin on his face and said, "I have never done a love scene in my whole career. I've beaten people, I've been beaten, I've been killed, I've fought tournaments against multiple opponents, but this is the first time I've done a love scene, you know." And he was genuinely sort of very, very excited about doing something that took him out of his usual sort of area of expertise, shall we say. That's not to say that he's not an expert in that, but on camera.
Well, I mean, I love that you talk about just sort of having a circle of people you work with, because I mean, even in reference to Daniel, I mean, watching the film, I'm like, I'm surprised this isn't Scott Adkins. Scott could have done a great job in this role too, but Daniel brings so much fun brings so much great energy to the table. And I mean, for you, how important is it to have sort of a circle around you when you're making films, especially at a fast clip, to have sort of that second hand where you don't necessarily have to sort of run through everything and explain everything?
I love the people I work with. I love my crew, and I love the cast I work with. I really, really embrace meeting new people and working with new cast and new key personnel. And I like breaking people in that have not worked on movies before and giving them a chance and seeing if they rise to the occasion. But there's a shorthand that develops when you work with people over and over artistically, where you don't have to explain things in great depth, and I can focus on making the movie, because my first AD, who knows me very well, will have set up what roughly he knows that I want, and I can zip in there. So it makes things move very, very quickly. I know how hard I can push a person. I know what they're capable of and what they're not capable of, and it makes things exciting and fun, and it creates a sort of family atmosphere, where everyone is working to make the best film possible. Obviously money is important, and people get paid to make my movies. Some of them get paid a lot of money, but ahead of all of that, I like to think that they're there to make the best possible product. And at this point, I've worked them so many times over and over. Even the layman second assistant who's worked, knows that if we do a good job on this one, the amount of press and coverage and sort of daylight that film gets on it helps the next one get paid, and it has a direct correlation to their paycheck, which I think people are starting to get excited about. My stunt coordinator has worked with me for 15 years and worked with me on my first picture, which was free, and everyone worked for free. And the next picture, because that one did well, they all got paid. And then somewhere around about picture 3 or 4, we flipped to union, and so his paycheck started to become very significant. And the last couple of years, he's been, it's been an extraordinarily good rate. So when you have crew members around you who see that progression, not only artistically but financially, I think it's wonderful, and they become very motivated to do good work for you.
Is that how you were brought into the business? Because when I go through your credit list, you literally have been a bit of a jack of all trades in this business from sort of minute one.
Yeah. Well, my family were in stunts. My grandfather provided horses for movies back in the time of Arabesque and Ryan's Daughter with David Lee. And he was, he was a racehorse trainer, and also, on the side provided horses. My uncle used to ride the horses for him, got his SAG card, and became a very, very successful stuntman and stunt coordinator in the UK, doing the first 3 Raiders of the Lost Ark movies and the last 5 Pierce Brosnan and James Bond films. So I was very lucky, extraordinarily lucky, to be born into that house of Armstrong, who managed to give me a pretty good sort of chance at working early off, because I was terrible at school. So 14, 15 years old, I started working on pictures and learnt my trade as a PA. And while I was sort of making up my mind on how to get where I wanted to go, I knew I wanted to be a director. You have 5 or 6 different resumes. One is a PA, one is an art department PA, one is a location scout, one is a stunt assistant. And I would turn up at production offices in the early days and say, "What do you need? I'm your man." And they say, "Oh, we don't need any PAs." And I said, we need art department. I said, "That's amazing. I'm also art department." And you would literally do what you could. And in the old days, the Hollywood Reporter would have the Tuesday edition that had all of the productions in development or pre-production. You'd get your Thomas guide, which for the young kids is the equivalent of a GPS on a telephone. You'd mark them all around a certain zone. You'd get in your car with your resumes, and you'd literally knock on doors and hit them up. And I think it was good to start that way, because hustling is part of the game, and you have to understand it and love it and enjoy it. And you put your hustle hat on, which is smiling and shaking hands. And I got to say, that's helped me as a director, immensely, because I'm not afraid to do that. I'll get out there, and as far as I see it, it's part and parcel of being a filmmaker. You have to be able to hustle. You got to enjoy that work. It was also upsetting for my family, because they'd say, "Oh, you're between films. It's a good time for us to come visit." I said, "No, you don't understand. Between movies is the most busy for a filmmaker, because you're hustling, trying to get the next one going, But yes, it was a good start for me to do everything, to get a little bit of a taste for those films. I thought I was going to be a production designer for a while. I did 4 or 5 of those in a row, and then realized that I was not actually on set at all. I was opening the set in the morning and closing it at night. And I just love the process of making movies. I love it. It runs in my blood at this point. I realized when I smell the smell of a certain type of glue that they used at Pinewood Studios, it was that it brought back funny memories of visiting the stages when I was a kid. Either that, I was getting high on the glue, one of the two. But it was an amazing thing to realize that that's your DNA. That's your, you love it. You love the process, a little worrying, but it is good. I do.
Not many people could say that I love the smell of carpentry glue in the morning, but when it comes into this application,
I think it was actually fiberglass glue. And if anyone visits Pinewood Studios, you'll smell it. And it's
right.
overpowering as you go there because they use it, and I realized it was a flashback, an awful actually flashback to that's visiting film sets when I was a teenager. But yes, no, it was extraordinarily useful to be able to do all those jobs, and set me up pretty well. I drive various crew members nuts by trying to suggest how they might do a gag, and they promptly correct me and tell me I'm completely wrong and that it should be done another way, and that's great, and I like that. But it is useful to have done a lot of those gigs, and I always try and recommend it to people, although I don't know if it was the best way to become a director. My daughter is desperate to be a director. She's at film school. She's 21 and way ahead of where I was at 21. I was still standing at the very far edge of a film set, shouting, rolling, and cut at 21. And I thought it was the greatest job in the world. I think I did Shawshank Redemption, Mortal Kombat, Mr. Holland's Opus, all in 1 year. They'd bring me in to do the pictures that had a lot of extras, big because I love doing that. I love, it was called the Sausage Factory. You bring them in and you'd have to take them through this process of signing in, going through hair and makeup, getting the wardrobe done, getting their makeup on, and then onto set, and then you'd run through putting. It was a process to get them from arriving on set through to being on set as quickly as possible. And I'm Shawshank, there was one day we had 2,500 extras. So that sort of challenge was what really, really excited me. And for the longest time, I thought that's where I was going to end up. But you keep pushing and pushing, and eventually you realize you're only really happy when you're directing.
But it makes you uniquely qualified too, because you know how the machine works from top to bottom, and I mean that's a rarity these days. And I mean, I kind of love that you were born into the business, because in many ways it could have made you want to run in the opposite direction. Now, this is a bit of a dumb question, but I always like to ask it. Thinking back to the younger days, what was sort of the movie moment in your life where the light bulb went off and you went, okay, I want to be a filmmaker?
My darling mother, bless her heart, would rent. We had VCRs in England, so I'm not that old, but they were expensive, and so we didn't have one. We was a single mum, so she would rent Super 8 projectors for my birthday that showed clips, and one of them was Alien, Clash of the Titans. I think it was honestly Clash of the Titans, and realizing that this magic that I was seeing was actually made by someone, the stop motion that Ray Harryhausen did for that one. And so that led to lots and lots of books on Marion C. Cooper, and obviously the process they used for the 1931 King Kong, traveling mats, the monsters that were made on an endoskeleton, on a skeleton of wire, and then built up with layers of foam and then rubber on top of that could be moved. And then obviously Phil Tippett and the Go motion that he came up with, for the early Star Wars movies and the chess game that they play in there. I found that stuff. It was I had taken for granted watching it that it was real, like every other young child, and then you suddenly there's the realization, the light bulb going off, that this was created, this was designed. And in the 80s, they sold these books called The Art of, I don't know if they do it anymore, The Art of Blade Runner, The Art of...
yeah, totally, yeah.
And they were big, thick color books. And I wore mine out going through them. The storyboards, Joe Johnston, the artist who drew for the Star Wars movies, and the concept became a director. The concept art, Ralph McQuarrie, these guys were gods to me. They were legends. And then comic books like 2000 AD. I knew Juan Smith, the artist, like Carlos Esquerra and Brian Bolland, and these guys. This was my Chris Foss's artwork. I saw June last night, and I realized they used a lot of the inspiration that Chris Foss drew out and came up with for that movie. I think he did it for the Jodorowsky version, but they obviously, Villeneuve obviously used some of it for the version they just did. And so these concepts, the ideas that these films, which I thought were basically real life, were being taken from art and paintings and drawings and sketches and comic books and storyboards. So exciting. It was so overwhelmingly powerful and profound for me that I from that point to now, I still find it exciting, and I can't think of wanting to do anything else for a living,
And I'm glad you saw Dune last night. I mean, that is a hell of a movie, isn't it?
I loved it. I thought it was a little long, and I hated that they ended it with that stupid cliffhanger ending. But I thought, it was a beautiful universe they created, incredible performances, and he's an incredible director, man. God, he's good. It makes you angry when you watch those guys work. You're like, fuck, how do they do it? It's so good. And to, but also the gamesmanship of being, as a director, people say, oh yeah, but he had this much money to do it. No, you don't understand. That's part of being a director, is coming up with, a scenario where you have the tools and the money to do it. The fact that Paul Thomas Anderson can make these incredible movies with these budgets is down to his ability, his gamesmanship. You know, you know, if he gets himself that kind of money, no matter whether it's his partner raising it, he's put himself in that position. That's part of the directing process. You find yourself with less than $1 million to make a movie, that's your problem because you agreed to it. You know, it's not, you know, a film doesn't come out with a price tag and it's judged accordingly. They're all judged next to each other, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It's tricky, but yeah, I think he's phenomenal. And I thought the movie was phenomenal, you know?
I love that you bring up gamesmanship because I mean, I think your gamesmanship is just the hustle, like we were talking about earlier. Because I mean, when you go through your CV, you've always been working pretty consistently. There's never been a lot of stop or a lot of break. Like, is there a secret, or is it just a question of putting on that hat and going to work?
It's putting on the hat and going to work, being cheerful, being creative, wanting to work with people, making people want to work with you. Very, very early on in the process, I was writing scripts like crazy, and I sent them out to a friend of mine who's a script writer, and he took me aside and said, the ideas are good, Jesse, but you've got to remember, you've got to create a script that people enjoy reading. It's not about the plot or the characters. Firstly, it's got to be an enjoyable read. And it was a profound light bulb going off. It's like, oh shit, that's what it is. It's entertaining people, you know? And vis-a-vis your conversation at the room when you're trying to raise money to make your movie, they've got to want to make that movie with you for the next year. You can't be an artist suffering and angry and painful inside. It's going to be obstreperous and difficult to deal with. That's not going to work out for you. You've got to be positive. You've got to want to make the film that is as close as possible to the film that they have in their imagination to get their money out of their pockets. And often it's millions of dollars. So you've got to be talking on the same wavelength. And I think just being genuinely honest about that from the get-go has served me quite well. Is there a trick to it? I work very, very hard. My films have made a lot of people an enormous amount of money. They're not losing money on these pictures. You know, when I sit down to make a film, I make the film for myself, but I have a very blue-collar taste in movies. I don't think I'm particular. I like some of the black and white Fellinis, and there's a few films that I like that are a little bit out there, but for the most part, those films were fairly blue-collar when they were made back in the 60s and 70s anyway. They weren't particularly highfalutin. I think my taste is pretty everyman, and so my films tend to appeal to people that like to watch movies and are digging it. You know, they're not difficult. There's, you know, I get disappointed if my film is not satisfying. I get very, very disappointed. And I get disappointed when I see a movie that's not satisfying, doubly if it's one of my ones. And there's been one or two that slipped by there, whether the producers nabbed it and did their sort of, you know, Edward Scissorhands on it, which I had a couple of times, and it's very, very disappointing. But again, that's down to my gamesmanship. What did I do wrong that I allowed a scenario to occur where the producers were able to come in and screw my movie up, you know? And it happened 2 or 3 times. You can't cry about it in the corner. You just try and work out how to not have it happen a second time or a third, you know? It becomes, you know, a challenge as you go along. I think, yeah, honestly, it comes down to making money for people in this business.
Yeah.
And it's a shameful thing. You'd like to say, well, my art is great, and they dig what the statement that I'm trying to make, but that's all BS, unfortunately. If your films are making a profit, there will be people wanting to work with you.
For sure.
And then, actually, I am making it too simple. If your film has characters in it that are compelling and interesting, and actors want to work with you, I think that may even be more or as important as well, you know? I think you're almost 50-50 between that for me at my point. Looking back at almost 50 years of age, looking back at my run, if an actor comes in, looks at your movies and goes, oh shit, this guy would be exciting to work with. It might be interesting. He's going to get something cool out of me. That's really worked in my favor as well, because the leading actors are often the ones that are actually sort of dictating who gets money spent on their films or not anyway.
Well, you know what? I think you're absolutely right about that, because I am familiar with some of your work. And I mean, I always thought something like Savage Dog never got quite the love it deserved. And I mean, Accident Man is just hilarious. I thought it was a great ride. And I mean, Hell Hath No Fury is a fantastic ride too, man, because it just puts you in there and it puts you on the edge of your seat and makes you guess where are we going to go next. And it's a fun, but still kind of brutal and emotional movie at the same time. And I just want to say thanks for the time and thanks for the work, man. Keep it up.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate the time you took to look into my movies, and hopefully people enjoy this one. We'll see.
For sure. Absolutely. Thanks again, Jesse.
Thank you, David.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.